One down, 4 to go on my quest to complete the hardest challenge in Football Manager, the Pentagon Challenge. In the last episode, we won the African Champions League with South Africa's Cape Town Spurs, and now the job hunt begins for the next club in my journey, with my plan being to head to Asia and hopefully use my boosted 2.5-star reputation and National A coaching license to secure a job in the top flight of one of the major leagues on the continent. So we're aiming for China, Korea, or Japan. But I like to play Football Manager as realistically as possible. So I'm not just going to quit my current job and apply for everything that's available. Instead, I'll be carrying on with Cape Town Spurs, hopefully winning a few more things to boost my reputation a little more, whilst applying for interesting jobs when they become available. So with 13 months left on my current deal, we need to find something fairly soon. But we don't need to apply for any of the lower league jobs that are the only things available immediately after my Champions League win. So with all that in mind, leave a like on the video if you're enjoying the series so far, and let me know down in the comments section where you think I should go next. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. That's quite important. And while you're doing that, I need to get started on what will almost certainly be my last transfer window in Africa, which ultimately ended with me not signing anyone, but most importantly, not selling any of my stars either. I want them all to still be here in South Africa nice and cheap, so I can take some of them with me to my new club, wherever that ends up being. And on the topic of a new club, goodness me, has there been slim pickings over the summer. The majority of the Asian leagues run opposite to the schedule of South Africa, with their seasons going on over the summer, so they were just getting their seasons started when we won the Champions League, and although they're now reaching their halfway points, they still haven't had any big jobs come up. But there is finally a vacancy in the J League at newly promoted Fujieda, who find themselves in the relegation zone in their first season in the top flight. Despite my winning CV, Harry Kuehl's the favourite for the job ahead of me. He's currently managing Yokohama FC in a promotion push in the Japanese second tier though, so if he gets the job ahead of me, replacing him at Yokohama wouldn't be the end of the world. We had a little bit of an iffy start to the season with Cape Town, picking up only 1 point from our first 2 matches and sitting down in 9th place by the start of September, and it's pretty clear that both me and half the team are more focused on what our next step is going to be rather than performing for Spurs. And that next step is getting interesting because shortly after the Fujieda job became available, more established J-League team Sagan Tosu sacked their manager while sitting in 18th place in the league, and recent J-League champions Vissel Kobe sacked their manager after a poor start to the season. He was replaced by the manager of Shimizu S-Pulse. Even with their manager leaving, they were still sitting in mid-table in the league with 9 games remaining and board expectations to just avoid relegation. I applied for every one of these jobs as soon as they became available, but Shimizu were the first to interview me, and despite having some reservations over my lack of Japanese language skills, they were impressed with how quickly I'd become fluent in Sesotho and good at Afrikaans. So they offered me a 2-year contract, trebling my salary, and most importantly, promised me a £22 million transfer budget. My record signing in the save up to this point was the $95,000 we spent on Etiosa Ighodaro. We're entering a whole new world at a club with enormous potential. We've got £37 million in the bank, £22 million to spend, 100k a week in spare wage budget, and absolutely no debt. This club is built for me to have some fun. As we're already entering the final stages of the season, my initial job was just to steady the ship. We'd already been knocked out of both of this season's domestic cups, so we just had the final 9 league games to navigate. Despite sitting in 8th place, the media still expect us to end up 15th, and the board are happy as long as we're not relegated, which, considering we're 17 points clear of the relegation zone, shouldn't be too taxing, even for a club with only 1 win in its last 6 games. And in fact, if I can get the team firing quickly, we're still only 8 points behind 4th place and a Champions League qualification spot. So with my eyes firmly on the Asian Champions League prize, I loaded up the tactic that had served me so well in South Africa, posted roughly 1,000 job adverts to try and sort out the horrific coaching setup I'd been left with, and sent my one and only scout to cast his eyes over my old squad at Cape Town Spurs to see which of my boys he thinks could make it in Japan. We're allowed 5 foreigners in our squad in Japan, and the sooner 2 of those 5 are Bartman and Big Rushwin Dortley, the better. And we started with a bang, thumping second place Avispa Fukuoka 5-0 in my first match, and then winning again against Jubilo Iwata. Any Champions League qualification hopes were effectively killed when we lost our next 2 matches, but then 4 wins on the bounce, inspired by the incredible goal-scoring form of 19-year-old Kasuka Naito, who scored 6 goals in 3 games during this run, left us going into the final day of the season with an outside shot at 4th place. If we beat Kashima Antlers and the other results went our way, we could sneak in, and when 18-year-old Mitsuteru Morimoto put us ahead 14 minutes into his first start for the club, we briefly dreamed, but 3 Antlers goals early in the second half destroyed our hopes, and we ended up finishing the season exactly where we were when I arrived, in 8th place, so no Champions League for us next year. It turns out we'd stumbled across an incredible youth setup here at Shimizu that wasn't being used by the previous manager, so my first 9 games saw the introduction to the squad of not just Naito and Morimoto, but also 18-year-old right-back Yoko Suzuki and left-winger Naoki Saito, with several more 18-year-olds pushing for starting spots too. We'd also dipped into the transfer market for the first time, securing a deal for Liam Byrne, scorer of our winning penalty in the African Champions League final, scheduled to join for just £275,000 because Cape Town Spurs have no money. They were quickly followed by Luke Bartman for £350,000, Ashley Capito for £425,000 and Rushwin Dortley for £375,000, and basically for less than £1.5 million I'd ripped the heart and soul out of my former team, leaving them stuck down in mid-table, but assembled a little South African core of proven Champions League winners here in Japan to complement my exciting youngsters. We focused on even more exciting Japanese youngsters with the rest of our spending, bringing in 19-year-old midfielder Nozomi Watanabe, 19-year-old left-back Kensaku Izozaki, and 18-year-old midfielder Yosuke Yoshikawa, bringing our total spend for the window to just £4.4 million from the £22 million we had available. And we even sold £2.7 million worth of old men and fringe players, most notably Issa Callan for £1.1 million, and 32-year-old Carlinhos Jr., who went back to Brazil to open up foreign spots for my South African boys. All of that meant we ended the window with a budget even bigger than one we started with, and a much stronger team, with Bartman and Capito competing with youngsters Naito and Morimoto, and last season's top scorer Shoto Fujio for the 4 attacking positions, Liam Byrne slotting in as our playmaker in midfield, and Rushwin Dortley as a 6'4" monster at the back. Bringing the reigning African Defender of the Year to Japan has got to be one of the best pieces of transfer business I've ever done, by the way. No idea how he's not ended up in Europe. Ashraf Hakimi finished 3rd behind him for African Defender of the Year. This guy's good. The media are less convinced by my transfers, presumably because of the low reputations of the South African boys, but we started the season well, Rushwin Dortley doing what he does on his debut, getting the equaliser away against pre-season title favourites Vissel Kobe, with Ashley Capito grabbing a 93rd minute winner in the next match. My boys were having an immediate impact playing in a system they'd already had so much success with. We lost only one of our opening 8 matches, and by the end of the transfer window were 2nd in the league, just 1 point behind Kobe, and the new team was starting to click. By the time the summer transfer window came around in July, we were 7 points clear at the top of the league, and Bartman had established himself as the best player in Japan, 3rd in the goal-scoring charts with 14 goals plus 13 assists, and an average rating of 7.71 from just 23 matches. And he'd also formed a great partnership with Fujio, who at 26 years old was having the season of his career with 15 goals, 8 assists, and an average rating of 7.67, putting him just ahead of Bartman in the goal-scoring charts, and just behind him in the average rating and assists tables. Bartman even made it into the media Dream 11, so his Japanese reputation was on the rise as well. Youngsters Morimoto and Naito both continued to impress, and Ashley Capito also got into double figures for goal contributions. But rather than resting on our laurels, we spent the summer window pushing on and trying to improve the squad further. We didn't want to just win the league, we wanted to put together a team capable of winning the Asian Champions League, which has so far been dominated by Saudi Arabian teams with their expensively assembled superstar squads. No Japanese team made it beyond the quarterfinals last season, but Vissel Kobe had been losing finalists the year before, so if we can build a team capable of comfortably winning the J-League, we'd maybe stand a chance. With all that in mind, we kicked the window off with the biggest sale in our history, with Mykola Shaparenko leaving for £6.25 million to one of those Saudi Arabian teams that we fear so much, Al Hazem, to free up another foreign player spot in our squad. 2 days later, we smashed our incoming transfer record too, signing fullback Shinya Nakano for £8.75 £2.5 million, quickly followed by midfielder Sota Kawasaki for £3 million, 20-year-old South Korean international striker Park Seung-soo for £3.2 million, and midfielders Daiki Kaneko for £1.4 million and Toshiyuki Umimura for £1.4 million to give us very solid strength in depth throughout the squad. All of this brought our total spend for the season to £22 million, which was our original budget, but with £11 million of player sales to balance it out a bit, we ended the window still with a budget of £21 million and £37 million still in the bank. And most importantly, we were still top of the league with 9 games to go, and we were still in the Emperor's Cup 2, the winner of that also qualifying for a Champions League spot, with the club looking good for a first J-League title in their history, and most importantly, Champions League football next year. And that all-important Champions League spot was confirmed with 5 games to spare, with a 5-0 win over bottom of the league Imabari, thanks to a Morimoto hat-trick. This guy is still only 18, and those goals put him to 13 for the season from just 17 starts. I think we might have a superstar on our hands here. The board responded by giving me an even bigger transfer budget of £30 million for the upcoming window. So now I just needed to repay their faith by delivering that J-League title. But before I could do that, I had my first big decision to navigate here in Japan, because for the first time in the save, I was headhunted by no less than last season's J-League champions, Yokohama. Undeniably a bigger club, it would have been a no-brainer last season to choose them over Shimizu, and would have been a much harder decision if they were going to qualify for the Champions League this year. But with them sat down in 10th place, going there just sets me back too far in my quest, because at best we'd go in there, win the league next year, and then play in the Champions League for the first time in 2 years. And at that point, I'll have been in Japan for 3 years, won the league twice, and still never played in the Champions League. And we're here to win the Champions League. So that'd be mad. Having not even attended the interview, we won the league with a game to spare, beating Nagoya Grampus 3-0, with Morimoto and Fujio continuing to develop their partnership that's managed to push Bartman out onto the wing and Naito out of the starting 11 altogether. And then on the last day, we beat second place Kashima Antlers 3-0 to end the season with a 9-point gap behind us at the top of the league. Shota Fujio is the league's top scorer on 28 goals, Bartman top of the assist table with 19, and Fujio just pipping Bartman to top average rating on 7.75. We now had £30 million to spend to improve this team even further and make it competitive in the Champions League. And we had longer than expected to do it, because despite the Japanese season running from February to December, the Asian Champions League runs from August to May, so we wouldn't actually be playing in it for the first time until towards the end of the upcoming season. And if we made it to the knockout rounds, they won't happen until the middle of the season after. So in addition to signing players to improve our squad, our mission for the next several windows is to stop our young stars like Morimoto and Bartman being headhunted by European clubs before we have a chance to use them in the Champions League. With the squad already the best in the league, we didn't feel the need to do a lot of incoming business before the new season, only spending big on a couple of players from FC Tokyo, with 19-year-old centre-back and already full Japan international Takuji Akuda joining us for £5.25 million. And yes, I know he's a 5'6" centre-back, but this is Japan, and he has got 6'4" Rushwin Dortley alongside him. I think he'll be fine. Along with 20-year-old left-back Yozo Kabari for £2.7 million. We managed to avoid losing any of our important players and just loaned out some fringe youngsters, and we were ready to go again. The media still only thought we were good enough to finish 9th, and Bartman somehow lost his spot in the Dream 11, but Akuda went straight into it and joins our other Japanese young superstars as part of a very bright future for the club, and a group of young players that should have improved even further by the time we hit the business end of the Champions League in just over a year's time. We started the season in incredible form, with Fujio scoring for fun, and by the time the transfer window closed, we were 4 points clear at the top of the league and hadn't lost a game. But we had spent some more money, this time on some more experienced players to keep some balance in our young squad and offer some strength in depth. 30-year-old striker Koki Ogawa arrived for £2.8 million, along with Takuro Kaneko for £4.1 million, Masaya Shibayama for £4 million, and Haruya Fuji for £4.8 million, while we sold a few of the fringe players who hadn't really worked out to make room for them. Once again, we'd spent more than £20 million on players, but ended up with our bank balance largely unchanged and loads of money still in the budgets. There's money in Japan, it seems. By the time the summer transfer window arrived, we were 8 points clear at the top of the league and looking good for a second title. Mitsuteru Morimoto had fully established himself as as a star, still only 19, but the J-League's top scorer on 16 goals, just ahead of his strike partner Fujio, and Bartman was still an assist machine on the right-hand side. We were now finally starting to get the respect we deserve from the media too, with them now predicting a third-place finish for us, with 4 of our boys in the Dream 11, Byrne and Akuda at the back, and Morimoto and Bartman up front. We spent big again over the summer and saw our first victim of our accelerated success, with Kosuke Naito, who looked like he was going to be a superstar when I first arrived, being sent out on loan to the K-League, having only started 1 game in the last year. Meanwhile, we added to our small collection of Japanese internationals, with Kaishu Sano arriving for £2.9 million to provide cover for Liam Byrne, along with a couple more backup players and the exciting prospect of 20-year-old centre-back Koshiro Oki for £4.3 million, who already has 6 caps for Japan. And this is now the squad that's going into the Champions League for the first time, almost 2 years after I arrived in Japan, and we're in a potentially challenging group with Australian champions Central Coast Mariners. Only 1 team from each group progresses to the knockout stages, and the entire competition is split into East and West until the final, but we have to be the best team in the group to qualify, and if we do, we'll be facing other East Asian teams, with the only time we could come against a Saudi team being in the final. In the end, we cruised through our group undefeated, the only match that wasn't a comfortable win, our final away game against Central Coast Mariners that we drew 0-0. But we have a tricky draw in the first knockout round against reigning Korean champions Ulsan. The Korean League is only behind Japan and Saudi Arabia on the competition reputation list for Asia, so this is effectively the 2 best teams in all of East Asia facing off against each other super early in the competition, with the winner looking like a pretty good bet to go all the way through to the final. And that all happens next season for us now, because whilst we were navigating our group, we were also finishing off our domestic season and ended up winning the league by 20 points, with Morimoto and Fujio scoring 47 goals between them to finish first and second on the goal scoring charts. The Ulsan Champions League games came before our domestic league started up again, and our transfer window had barely even opened when it happened. We did have time to add 1 player, 20-year-old Masahiro Arakawa, joining for £5.5 million, and we shipped a load more youngsters out on loan again. Also, during the off-season, our South African boys went off to the African Cup of Nations and all came back with winners' medals, despite Luke Bartman never actually having played a game of international football. He's got a medal now. Rushwin Dortley also came back with only 1 foot properly attached to the rest of his body, meaning we'd have to face the Champions League knockouts without the best defender in the competition. The first leg against Ulsan didn't start great, with us going 1-0 down early on, but Bartman equalised on the 25th minute and then helped force an own goal a minute later, and we took a narrow lead back to Japan with us, where we were always comfortable in a 2-0 win with goals from Morimoto and Bartman. Our reward for beating one of the best teams in Korea was a quarter-final against one of the other best teams in Korea, FC Seoul, and we were once again away in the first leg, and this game was bonkers. Injuries, disallowed goals, penalties, loads of yellow cards. It seems we're not the best of friends with FC Seoul, but we actually took the lead just before half-time for a Fujio penalty before 2 goals either side of half-time for Seoul saw them in the lead going into the final minutes of the match, before Kosuke Naito, freshly returned from his loan in South Korea last season, grabbed an equaliser, having only been on the pitch after an injury to Shibayama early in the match. Having survived a brutal first leg, we were pretty confident of getting a result at our place like we'd done in the previous round, but that confidence was long gone by half-time, with us 3-0 down, and we just never got into the game. None of our stars turned up, and I've never missed a player more than I missed Rushwin Dortley in that game. And that was our Champions League run over for this year. We'd already qualified for next season's competition after winning the league last year, but these Korean teams look quite good. We're comfortably the best team in Japan, but struggled against 2 top Korean sides, so we'll give it another go with Shimizu next season, but I'm not against heading to Korea to finish the job, if that's what it takes. If the Korean lot are better than us, if you can't beat them, join them. The board, presumably sensing what I was thinking, immediately offered me a new contract, and although I considered letting it run down like I had in South Africa to make myself easier for other teams to hire, I decided to sign a new deal with Shimizu and effectively commit to winning the Champions League here. We still had a full domestic season ahead of us, so we made a few new signings, including the brilliantly named striker, Shuto Machino. I love that name, and set about winning a 3rd successive league title, which we cruised to even without Rushwin Dortley, who tore the ligaments in the same ankle he broke in his return match. And with a recurring ankle problem, I'm starting to worry one of our greatest heroes of the save might be done. Shuto Machino lived up to his name, finishing as top scorer in the J-League as we won the league by 25 points. It wasn't all rosy though. It seems Saudi Arabia has noticed us and decided to stop us rising up as potential competitors to their clubs in the Champions League, throwing their money around to turn the heads of our players. Over the course of the season, we lost young superstar Morimoto to Al Wada for £7 million, Naito to Al Fatih for £4.6 million, and right at the end of the season, Masahiro Arakawa to Al Taiwoon for £9.5 million, less than a year after we signed him. He wasn't the only player to have a very brief spell with us either, as we used our new higher profile in the world game to attract a European up-and-coming star for the first time, signing Italian striker Tommaso Ibone from Como to replace Morimoto after a Golden Boot winning season in the Italian second tier, but he got homesick and ended up back in Italy at Empoli within 6 months. We comfortably navigated our Champions League group again, even with all this going on, finishing with 6 wins from 6, including a 9-0 win over Eastern AA from Hong Kong that included 5 goals from Ibone, demonstrating that he would have been great if he'd taken to Japanese life the way my South African boys did. Maybe I should learn to speak Italian and sign 3 more Italians to work with him so we can settle him in a little bit easier, like we did for them. Having seen so many of our Japanese youngsters ripped away from us by Saudi Arabian clubs, and not put off by the Ibone incident, we decided to cast our scouting net further to prepare our squad for the knockouts, bringing in Nigerian midfielder Daniel Daga, Ivorian right-back Frank Bamba, and a couple of new Japanese youngsters in Niki Umiguchi for £4.1 million, Tosunori Komatsu for £2.1 million, and Ryota Ochai for £1.8 million. The first knockout round draw saw us facing off against the team that knocked us out last year, FC Seoul. This time we were at home in the first leg, and Luke Bartman used the match as an opportunity to demonstrate why he'll forever be the true hero of the save, scoring both goals in a 2-0 win before a second leg that was reminiscent of our away game in Seoul last year. We went 1-0 down after 17 minutes before Sano equalised from a Bartman assist just after half-time. Bartman and Kato both had goals chalked off before Seoul grabbed a late winner in the 88th minute to make it 2-1 on the night, but 3-2 to us on aggregate. We had our revenge, and we're back in the quarterfinals again, where we face a Cerezo Osaka side, despite being down in mid-table in the J-League that we dominated for the last 3 years, knocked Seoul out in the semi-finals last year before beating Al Ittihad in the final to win the whole thing. Without me even noticing at the time, because I was sulking and focusing on the league, a Japanese team had won the Champions League last year. It just wasn't us. We had to believe that if we could knock out the holders, which we should be able to based on league form, we could go on and win the whole thing. The first leg was a nervy 0-0 at their place before Shuto Machino lived up to his incredible name, scoring twice in the first 7 minutes to put us in control. Osaka got a goal back just before half-time, but Bartman did what Bartman does in the 70th minute, grabbing our third and seeing us through to the semi-finals. It's now 4 years since he was a key part of our African Champions League winning team, and at this point, with Dortley never really getting back to his best and Capito drifting down the pecking order, only Bartman and Byrne are regularly featuring in this team that were still in that were from the team back then. Our semi-final opponents were Shanghai Port, who, like us, had never previously made it to the quarterfinals. We were feeling confident, and the first leg very much went to plan, with us taking the lead on 11 minutes through a Fujio penalty before Shuto Machino doubled the lead just after half-time. The second leg was a lot tenser, though, with Shanghai going ahead after 17 minutes, leaving them just 1 behind on aggregate, and that's how it stayed until the 88th minute, when Takanori Takasu, our latest Japanese teenage sensation who we'd signed for £2.5 million from Gamba Osaka just a few months before, grabbed the equaliser to rubber stamp our victory and send us to a final against last season's beaten finalists Al Ittihad, who'd presumably be ready for revenge on Japanese opposition after what happened last year. Their squad includes the likes of Gabriel, Lautaro Martinez, Pedro Gonçalves and Jack Grealish, so they're certainly not going to be pushovers. And they showed it in the first leg in Saudi Arabia, injuring Shuto Machino after just 2 minutes before scoring a winner in a tight game on 73 minutes through Lautaro Martinez, leaving us with a 1-goal deficit to overturn in the return fixture if we were to complete part 2 of our Pentagon challenge. And the second leg was just as tense as the first, with it still sitting at 0-0 in the 79th minute when Rushwin Dortley, starting only his 6th game in 2 years, rolled back the clock to score one of his trademark headers to put us ahead on the night and level in the tie before Masara Shibayama's 91st minute winner sealed the result for us, 2-0 on the night, 2-1 on aggregate, and we were champions of Asia with both Liam Byrne and Rushwin Dortley in the side, just like they had been when we won the Champions League down in South Africa, and they would have been joined by Luke Bartman as well. He hadn't been kept out of the side by injury. But ultimately, he was replaced in the team by Shibayama, who scored the winner. So it all worked out all right in the end. We continued to dominate the Japanese league while all this was going on, and we're looking very good for a 4th league title in a row, but it's time for me to start looking for a new club. Just like with Cape Town, I'm not going to just resign from Shimizu on the spot. Instead, I'm going to wait for the right opportunity to present itself. And if we do stay until the end of the season, I might just end up as the greatest manager in Japanese football history, as I'm already 3rd on their Hall of Fame after 3 league titles, 1 Emperor's Cup, 2 League Cups, 2 Super Cups, and of course, this Champions League win. Although that doesn't actually count for the Hall of Fame. The Nation Hall of Fame, I don't think. I'm also 3rd on the Asian Hall of Fame, but have yet to break into the worldwide one or the English nationality one. Surely, though, I'm going to be top of all of them by the end of the save, which I don't think I've ever done before. So where next? I'm thinking North America is the logical next step, and looking at the CONCACAF Champions League past winners list, Mexico seems to be the best plan, but the MLS might be fun because I've never really learned the rules of the league. There's currently no top division jobs in Mexico available, but 1 each in the MLS and the Canadian Premier League, but none of them really excite me. I'm a 2 times Champions League winner with a 4.5-star reputation and a Continental Pro license at this point, so theoretically I could get any job in the world. So I'll just keep an eye on what's available, and whether I end up in North America, South America, or Europe next, it needs to be a club that's already playing in the Champions League. I don't want to spend another 4 years at the next club. So where do you want to see me go next? Let me know down in the comments section what you would do at this stage. And of course, if you're enjoying the series, leave a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next episode, and that should be with you this time next week. Thanks for watching.